Hi, and welcome to Dear Art Producer. I am your host, Heather Elder, and today is March 20th, 2024, and we are joined by senior producer at Dentsu Creative, Ilana Galang. Ilana started her career at BBDO before spending about 10 years at Brooklyn Brothers, a small independent shop. From there, she moved to the mid-size agency 360i, which has since consolidated with other agencies to form Dentsu Creative. Over the years, she has worked on accounts such as 7-Eleven, Lego, Marriott, Apple TV Plus, Mountain Dew, NBC Sports, Lululemon, Sam Adams, and New Era, among many more. She's a doer, a planner, an organizer, and a problem solver. Ilana likes to say she specializes in not specializing, producing video, events, music, photos, websites, social, radio, animation, VFX, games, full campaigns, and one-off ideas. She also reps her husband, a full-time artist and illustrator. Welcome, Ilana. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to have you. I know it's been a little bit in coming. We've been talking about doing this for a little while. I'm so glad to finally have you as a guest. Thank you for making that happen.
Yeah, of course. This is so exciting.
Okay, good.
I feel like people don't always want to hear about the production side of things. It's all about the creative and the output. So talking about the process and how that gets made is really fascinating and I hope exciting to people.
Absolutely. And I think you've touched on something that's really important is that, as producers and, even reps, we spend so much of our time kind of facilitating, making a job happen. And oftentimes when the project comes to life, I don't want to say the credit because a lot of people are so good at sharing the credit, but the kudos and the excitement, it's all around what was created. So it is the creative that is, often, celebrated. So it is nice to be able to kind of get behind the scenes a little bit and understand what goes into kind of having to produce something like this. So having access to people like you is really important for our listeners. So thank you. I'd like to explore a little bit before we get started, just kind of what your career path was to this job. I really feel like it's so interesting when you look back, especially after over 100 episodes. So many people didn't even know what, being an art producer was when they were looking for jobs. And I'm not saying you have to go all the way back to before you were, thinking about it. But I do find it really interesting that, what is it that kind of excited you about this job, and what can you share about that?
Yeah, so I won't go all the way back, but starting in advertising, I actually started in account management. And actually in a very weird little facet of account management where I helped facilitate commercials and just all sorts of content going between international markets. So I don't know if that was really production per se, but it was moving productions from market to market. After that, I went a little bit more traditional account management. And I eventually found myself at the Brooklyn Brothers, which was a small agency, still again in account management. But because we were so small and entrepreneurial, everyone wore a lot of hats. We all had to do a lot of things to help, bring everything to life. And after, being there for a little bit of time, the head of production ended up leaving. She was moving on to another agency. And when she left, she told our boss, hey, why don't you help, fill the role of production with Ilana? She knows what she's doing. And I think that's a good fit for her. And that's really the first time I thought of myself as becoming a real producer. And from there, I kind of did the production alongside account managing the same projects, and eventually left all of the account management by the wayside and moved into being a full-time producer and haven't looked back.
That's great. Well, what a great opportunity for you to learn and grow and, to have someone trust in you to do that.
Yeah. And being in that environment was actually really helpful because if I was in, a bigger agency, I would have had to go through many, many, many more steps. But at a small agency, I was able to start producing my own projects really from the beginning. So I learned very quickly and I grew very quickly in kind of this partner situation. So, yeah, maybe a little back way in.
I think that's great. A good friend of mine's daughter was looking for a job recently, and she and I were having a conversation about these. She was fortunate enough to have two options to choose from, and one was a bit of a startup, and the other was a more traditional role at an ad agency. And she opted for the startup for that very reason. Someone was trusting her. She thought she'd get a lot more hands-on experience. There was going to be a lot more that she was going to have access to and be a part of. And I thought that was a really smart idea. I thought she'd learn a lot there.
Yeah, I think I might tend to agree with that.
Tell me a little bit about your role as an art producer at Dentsu. What is your day-to-day like?
I'm actually an integrated producer, so I will produce really anything that comes my way. So sometimes it is more art focused, but sometimes it's video focused or other sorts of content. But I think traditionally the way that it goes is I will be assigned a different project depending on what's coming up. We know that, a new project is coming down the pipe, what's about to get awarded, or not even awarded, I'm sorry, what's about to get, move into production. They'll see, which producers are available, who has that right skill set, and then they'll assign it to us. From there, I will be, out on the project from the beginning. So I will help seed the project, see what's going on, figure out how it's going to be made, find the right partners, and then kind of bring it all the way through to completion, post-production, all of that. So depending on what day within that process, many different things could be happening.
Yeah, I'm sure every day is different. What are you known for on your team?
Probably that I don't turn anything down, which is it's probably like a benefit and detriment to myself because, sometimes I'll get a project that maybe isn't so great. But also, I think that everyone wants to work with me. I hope that because I have kind of a positive go-getter attitude and I will try to figure out the best solution to said production problem. I'm not going to shy away from something that I haven't done before or I don't have so much experience doing. And I always want to help the team out. I don't want to say, oh, I'm too busy. I always try to help. So I think, I get lots of...
I think that's so important. And it seems like a given, but that positive attitude, so much of our job is hard. We're trying to make budgets work that don't work or timelines work that don't work or, giving people news that they don't want to hear or, clients expecting one thing, but only being able to get another. There's a million things that can go wrong on a daily basis, minute by minute. And I think about the art producers that I work with, and I think about the line producers that I work with. And the ones that are the most positive, I feel like, one, are the most enjoyable to work with. And two, we get the most done because they put up the least amount of roadblocks. And while we still might, the situation is not different, but because there's this positive attitude around it, it's more about how do we solve a problem than pointing out that we have a problem.
Yeah, for sure. And being producers, we are often the bad guys. We have to, like you said, we have to say, oh, we don't have enough money to do X, but maybe we can do something else.
Yeah.
Or we don't have enough time, but this is how we can make something else work within the time that we have. So it's a little bit of being the bad guy, but also being positive enough to problem solve and help bring them along your journey so that they also feel like just as happy with whatever new solution you've come up with to help solve those problems.
I agree. I totally agree. The next question I would want to ask you is, what do you think would be helpful for, artists and reps to understand better about your job? And maybe even, your insight as a rep for your husband could be helpful here.
Yeah, actually, I'll answer the second half of the question first about the helping my husband. So just a little background there. He actually came from advertising originally as an art director and went full-time artist a little while ago. And I have been helping him as a producer and having that insight into how production works, how the advertising agencies work. We are able to get a little bit more nuanced thoughts on what they might be thinking and know how to react, know how to pitch things to them. So I kind of am getting the two sides of it. I have like a little bit more insider knowledge than maybe a normal freelance artist would have. And that's maybe what you're trying to get at with this question, to know, what's going on inside the agency. And I think one thing that maybe the vendors or partners don't always think about is that it's one element to a larger campaign. That if we're looking for a photographer, it may be, all about the photography, and that's, entirety of everyone's budgets and energy is going into that photo project. But sometimes it's just a smaller piece to a larger puzzle. And we have to figure out the best way that everything fits together. So sometimes that's budget, where you're like, oh, this is a really big client on what you think is going to be a really big campaign. They've got to have loads of money. But when you take a step back and you say, oh, but you have to split it up between, there's a digital campaign and there's a video campaign and a photo campaign and, all these other pieces that have to ladder up to it. Each piece is not as big as one might hope. So sometimes we don't have as much as what the brand or the project might make it appear to be. And it's not that we are, I guess, trying to nickel and dime anyone when we come back with that.
No, but there's a lot. And I think that doesn't only just play into for the budget. I think it also kind of plays into, the timeline of maybe getting an award or getting information to someone, because it's not just, let's say the photo portion of the budget is just one piece of the puzzle, right? Then you have that piece of the puzzle. Now you've got to get all the other pieces of the puzzle in place before you can kind of award a job. And I think sometimes from where I sit, my artists, just in general, artists are like, we submitted the bid 3 days ago. Why haven't we heard? And I think part of that is kind of getting the rest of the puzzle together.
Exactly. At the moment, I have that exact problem right now. I am bidding a video production and I have my post-production all figured out. My editor is on standby, but I'm not able to tell them that they've got the job until we have the video portion figured out. So it is almost a little bit cart before the horse, or we have all of these pieces that we have to pull together before we can approve everything at once.
Yeah. No, I can see that. Okay, so you kind of brought up this idea of motion and editing and stuff, and I'm curious, what percentage of your projects tend to be still, and what percent tend to be motion, or do all your projects have both now?
I think most have both. I think it's very rare that there's zero overlap. Even if it's just like cinemagraphs or GIFs, there's some element of that motion. But there are, I think, about maybe close to 50-50, maybe a little bit more. I lean more heavily in video production, and that is more primarily video. 60-40, 60% mainly video, 40% mainly photos. But those mainly photo shoots have been mainly photo shoots where maybe it's tabletop photos, or maybe it's, a library shoot for their website. But then when it comes to video shoots, there usually is some element of, we also want to capture some still photography.
So when a project is motion forward, right? When there's mostly motion, do you tend to call a director or production company, or do you sometimes look at photographers who you know are also able to do motion? Is there a preference with you or your teams?
I think usually when it's dialogue driven, we'll definitely lean towards directors first. If it's visually driven, we will kind of lean maybe either way, more towards photographers first, see who has a good director reel alongside their still photography. Or depending on who our creative team is, they might have more insights into what they like. Some creative directors are totally visually driven, and then they're open to photo driven talent, while some are maybe a little bit more traditional advertising, and they're like, oh, if it's video, we want a director. But a lot of those visually driven directors just started out as photographers as well, so there's always that balance there.
In terms of the types of projects you're working on, what are your clients asking of you now?
I've been working on a lot of socially driven projects where they can range very, very drastically on what the content is going to be, because they don't always have a media buy behind them. If it's just coming up with what are some interesting ways to promote the business, and we'll figure out how to post it on social or share it around, that can really be anything. It can be photography and video, more traditional, but it could be an event that we then post about through social and disseminate the information that way. There was even a project I worked on a couple years ago that was building a car with follower engagement. So we were basically having followers vote on what the car is going to look like, and then we built a car. So it was all about just engagement, and we ended up with like a physical car at the end of it. I don't even know where this car is. That's that. I don't know anymore, but there's all these different elements that went into it. There was CG that was in there. There was fan collating of information. There was, of course, building the car, and then there was photography, and there was video to show what we've done at the end of it. So it really kind of encompassed all these weird different things.
Let's talk a little bit about marketing to you. How are photographers and directors connecting with you right now, and reps too? And is there a more effective and useful message that rises to the top?
I usually get marketing through email, and I think that's the best way. I am always on email. I will see it. I won't always be in the right headspace to see it. Right. So I don't mind getting a lot of marketing emails. Because sometimes I'll see it today and I'll have the time to look at it and take it in. And tomorrow I might be running around and I won't be able to take a look at it. So really, if I even get the same exact email yesterday and today, sometime like one day I might be able to give more time to it, and one day, unfortunately, I may not. So I don't mind. And it also matters timing. No one knows what I'm working on at any given time. Today I could be working on that weirdo car project, but tomorrow I could be working on, beautiful photography for a luxury brand. Those two completely different things, and I'll be looking for different things at those different times. So I feel like email is, I'm always at my email. I will always be seeing it. And the more I get it, I don't want to get spammed, but I am happy to see those things because it helps me learn more about what's going on. And if I'm not ready for your interesting illustration today, I might be ready for it next week. So,
well, you bring up some really good points there, because I often talk to my artists about the idea of, that repetition is okay. Just because you sent out that email blast and you put the imagery out on social, it doesn't mean we can't recurate that work in a way and talk about something different around the work so that it could, show up in someone's inbox again. obviously we don't want to send something keep sending the same thing over and over again. But if we can have a different message associated with it, and it, because for all those reasons, you just don't know who's going to see it and where they're going, where they're paying attention at the moment.
Right. And, for instance, I did a tabletop food shoot last fall, and I hadn't done one until since a year before that. But that doesn't mean that I don't need to know about any new food photographers the entire time between them. And I might not be able to reach out right away, but I know that eventually it'll come back around.
Are there any common mistakes or, pitfalls that photographers tend to make when they're trying to get your attention?
To be honest, I don't think so. Because like I said before, I'm okay with repetition. I'm okay with seeing you in my inbox over and over again. It obviously will make you a little bit more memorable. I think maybe the only thing that might be a little bit annoying is if someone were to respond many times and be like, "Hey, did you see this? Why didn't you answer me?
Oh my
God.
God.
Did you see this?"
Oh no.
It's like, yeah, I saw it and I'll get back to you when I can. And I try to respond often. I don't respond to, general marketing email blasts. And I do appreciate them. I love looking at the beautiful imagery and photography that's in those. And I save that information, especially if I feel like they might be relevant, but I don't always write back to those.
What type of work are your creatives gravitating to right now? Like when they come to you with a project, what is the direction that they're giving you?
It really depends on what the creative output is. I would have said before the project I'm currently working on is very comedy, scripted, more traditional commercial sort of thing that I haven't actually seen myself in a while. So prior to that, I would have said maybe I think things are leaning more towards the authenticity route, where we're trying to make things feel real and authentic, whether through actual authenticity with real people or, staged realism to make it feel as authentic and relatable as possible.
There were so many more requests for that authentic, real people, real patient, whatever the real was at the moment, and less of that humorous kind of conceptual bent. And this year, I feel like it's coming back. We're getting more requests for that. So it'll be interesting to see at the end of the year if it, was a bit of a wave or not.
Yeah, I think it might also be certain brands.
Yes.
There are even brands that are going after maybe a market that feels a little bit more curated or edgy or interesting. They still want to be authentic to that market. So the content might still feel curated and edgy and Gen Z-ish, but in their minds, that's what the Gen Z market or whatever market you're going after actually is. And it's authentic.
Yeah. The other thing I'm seeing a lot of too is this, and I'm guessing some of this is obviously a backlash to AI. Right? The idea of using real patients and real customers, the real Gen Z people that they talk to, people who really use a product in ads, which has always been kind of a big deal with using real patients. And I'm seeing it more in other type of, brand advertising as well. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How about when you have to find talent for a project, right? So you've scoped the project, your team has come to you with direction. How do you go about finding what you're looking for or what you want to share with your team?
Probably a mixture of scouring reels and websites on my own and reaching out to reps and partners to see who that they might have that I'm not aware of, who they think might be a good fit for the project.
And what's your process for sharing them with the team?
I will usually have a collated list of partners who I think would be good, starting maybe around like 10 to 15 or so, especially if we're trying to triple bid a project. I like to give them a little bit more so then we can narrow that list down, but they always want more than what you originally give them. But I'll try to send them, obviously, only the ones that I think are relevant to the project. And I'll send them a list. I'll give them the links. I'll tell them where they're from. I'll tell them a little note about why do I think that they're great. Check out this one thing that they did, or their general style is really in line with what your vision is, whatever. So I'll try to have a little note from me, and then I'll leave a space for notes from the creative. And then from there, we'll narrow it down and hopefully pick from that list. If not, I'll keep going back and searching for more based on their feedback. And then, of course, also depending on how much time we have for this process, if we have loads of time, this process can be a little bit more fleshed out, in depth, back and forth. If we have to rush and just award something right away, it's more like, here's my list. Who do you like from it? Let's go.
Is there anything that you find helpful on a website or that your creatives tend to appreciate?
I love when there are categories. When I'm looking at a photographer's website and there's, portrait, athletes, tabletop, anything like that helps me search and find the most relevant work. That's really, really helpful from a searching perspective and finding the right partners. Because sometimes you'll look at a website and if it's not easily categorized or searching, you're just kind of scrolling and you may miss something. They may have a whole, athlete section and all you see is celebrity portraits.
Yeah, I totally am a big fan of that for sure. I also like it. On our website, we have categories even before you get to the artists. So if you are going to the website and you're like, oh, hey, I'm looking for a portrait photographer, you could click on the category of portraits and it'll show you which artists have portrait portfolios.
I love that.
Which I think is really helpful as well. And I know when you're like sending links to your to your creatives, do you tend to send the photographer's link or maybe the reps category link, or do you just kind of scour both the rep site and the photographer site and just find the link that is most relevant for whatever you're doing?
Yeah, I'll go to both and I'll pick whichever one feels most relevant. Because if there's a focus on one site versus the other, I don't want them to look at the wrong one and not get that full vision of why I think they're right for the project. So I'll send them whichever link fits better for the project. But of course, let's say probably the reps website won't have as wide a range of content. So maybe there might be something missing that we're specifically looking for. But then at the same time, sometimes the photographer's website might be too broad. And again, we want to just focus on those athlete photography that is, very nicely collated on the rep's website. So whichever one kind of fits the creative best is what I'll share.
And you're narrowing that down with your team to most likely 3 still, right? You're going to triple bid a job?
When we have time, we do like to triple bid, yes.
And then, of course, in those cases, the creative call is even more important. What in your mind makes a great creative call, and what are some of the probably obvious things, but that, could really hurt someone on a creative call?
When we get to the creative call, we already love the work. We've already gone through all of those other partners and options and narrowed it down to 3 who we think are the best. And so, we already kind of think that any of those 3 partners would do a great job creatively. So the calls are really to get to know the personality of the photographer, see how they approach certain things, how they might use their past experiences to relate to this specific project or the specific brand. So really just getting to know them on these calls is what we're after. And calls where there's a nice back and forth and a good rapport, I've noticed are the ones that kind of get the jobs more often.
Yeah, it's interesting. It seems so obvious. And I think with Zoom, it's been really helpful, right? Because you can see each other and you can kind of engage with each other. And I think it's, I sit on so many creative calls, so I get to see so many different ways that teams interact with artists and the way artists handle themselves and all of it. And it's such an opportunity to, one, hear about a project, right? The vision and the excitement and the passion from the team's point of view. Because a lot of times people have been working on a project for months, right? Before it even gets approved. So, to hear that level of excitement. And then it's an opportunity to, I think share, and I wish more artists would do this, but like share your screens, share projects that you've done that are relevant and that you can kind of be a bit more interactive on the call, as opposed to just kind of talking through things and talking through logistics. Because I feel like a lot of times you and I can have a side call about logistics, right? This creative calls should, be a chance to kind of inspire each other. So I don't know, it's been kind of cool to be on these calls so often over the last few years that I can kind of see how they've all evolved.
Yeah, I think that's a good interpretation. I agree that the logistics can be set aside. We can talk about that from producer to producer, but it should really be a creative mind meld on these calls.
I like that, a creative mind meld. Okay, well, what about treatments? Do you guys require or expect treatments on most every project you're working on?
Again, it depends. More so if we have the time and the budget to be triple bidding, we do like to see a treatment. And that's, again, because we need to be able to differentiate between the photographers. When you go in and by the time you're triple bidding, we already know our general look. Is it moody and dark? And then we're going to have 3 photographers who can do moody and dark. We already know that you guys can do it. So with the treatment, we're able to see what are those nuanced differences, some of the things that we've talked about on the call, but now we have a paper format that we can share with the clients and say why this partner is going to be right for the project. So I think that the treatment is quite important in the process when we have the time to do it.
And do you share them with the clients, or do you just share portions of them, or does it depend on the project?
Usually we'll share the treatments with the clients unless there's an extenuating circumstance. So we will share the treatments for sure. Yeah.
And when it comes to choosing a photographer or director, and clients having seen treatments and obviously sitting on the calls with you and hearing your point of view, do you think that clients are choosing based on their own criteria, or are they different to their agency partners? And the reason, a little bit of background is, I feel like when you triple bid a project, or an agency triple bids a project, they have 3 really amazing choices, right? You're not going to choose people that you're not interested in, because you've got to present 3 to a client. So I feel like, as competition has increased and the world has gotten, all of the work out there is just so strong and there's so many great options, you're out there presenting 3 really top choices to your client. So it's pretty easy sometimes for the client to say, or for the agency to say, yeah, whichever one you like, we like them all. Or do you find that you guys go in with, a bit of a creative recommendation and then the client tends to follow it?
I think the instances where the client maybe does not follow the creative recommendation would be if there's anything that doesn't match up. For instance, if there is a large discrepancy in budget that one partner was not able to accommodate, or if there's a big usage difference where one said, I can only give you 1 year, but the other one said, I'll give you 5 years because you really wanted it and I can fit that. Those are, some pieces that we try to keep even between the partners so that the decision is not being made by those, we like to try to keep it as like the budget and the offerings are pretty equal. But if they are different, sometimes clients will decide based on that. Of course, they only have a certain amount of money. But also another instance could be if they've worked with a partner before and it was good or it was bad, they may gravitate towards that specific partner. But if all of those are not really in the mix, I think they do tend to go with a creative recommendation. They do like to hear what the agency has to say and who their preference is. Usually there is one who we've had a great conversation with. We have a good rapport going. Maybe someone has worked with them in the past and they know how good they are. So there is usually one of them that by the end of this whole process, we feel a little bit more strongly about. If not, if we're like on the fence, we will also tell the clients, these two really brought their A game. We would love to go with either of them. We can't pick, you pick. But if, all things going normal, I do think that clients tend to choose what the creative team has recommended, because you're right, all three partners are going to be great. And we haven't gotten to that process without, choosing good options.
Are there any common mistakes or pitfalls that photographers tend to make or artists tend to make when they're trying to land a job?
I don't really think so. I don't think I've seen anything as like a overarching issue or mistake. But what I would recommend to photographers is to be open and conversational and share relevant experiences that I think maybe when that information is lacking is when we don't feel as close to the partners.
That's interesting. I think that might go back to that creative call conversation we were just having about, let's not talk about logistics. Let's share work. Let's inspire each other. Let's share stories. Let's, connect. I think that, again, having sat on so many different calls and seeing so many different approaches to those types of calls, I find that when people go off script and don't, in a positive way, right? They don't stick to the agenda, let's say, and start just talking about things that excite each other. I think that's where I see these like little creative gems kind of pop up.
Yep, totally agree.
And what's your process to let someone know they didn't get a job?
That's my least favorite part of my job. Oh my gosh. It's heart-wrenching because as the producer, I feel like I'm usually the one who has the largest relationship with each of these partners. By this point, I've spoken to not only the photographer, but also the producer and sometimes the line producer. And we've been going back and forth for a week and everyone is great. We just have to only be able to pick one. So it's my least favorite part of the project, but it has to be done. And I try to give information when I can. If there's a reason why a decision was made, why they didn't get the job, I like to try to provide some information. Sometimes there's not a lot to be said because it's a close race and that's kind of all you can say. Sometimes it was so close, but they picked someone else. And sometimes it's the creative team picked someone else or the clients picked someone else. And it's not because of anything bad that anyone did or any wrong step or $2 off in the bid. That's not going to make a big difference, but a decision does have to be made. And so I guess if there's a real reason, I will try to give that. If there's not, don't feel that I'm holding anything back because I want it to be informative and helpful for the future.
Well, I can imagine that's the hardest. I mean, I never like telling my artists that they didn't get a job either. So I appreciate, we all appreciate any effort involved in sharing the news. It's always a bummer to not get a job because by the time you've done the creative call and the treatment and you've talked to all your, partners in it, you feel like you've produced the job. You've got a vision for it already in your head. And I think, especially in the last couple of years when things have slowed down, they don't get a lot of at-bats as much anymore. And, losing or not getting awarded a job it just stings a little bit more. So hearing that you are often trying to, share some feedback with them, I think really does go a long way. When we get those emails that say, sorry, we went in another direction, that falls really flat because there's so much time and effort that's put, especially into treatment. That's not a lot of information there. And even in where we understand there's often not a lot of information, like you said. Sometimes it's just a decision, but just recognize and know that, any information you can share, even if you just pick up the phone and call the rep and offer them an opportunity to ask some questions, is helpful. And it does go a long way. So I really appreciate that you're, open to that. And I'm empathetic to having to make those calls. I'm so sorry.
I actually have a question for you on this topic. Often, like I said, I form a relationship with all the bid partners, and, people usually have done a great job. And I remember that, and I'll want to work with them in the future. But how do you and your photographers feel about being called back in the future from the same agency, from the same producer, from maybe the same creative team for a different job when they didn't get the last job? Are you hurt? Do you feel like, oh, we didn't get it last time, why are you calling me back? Because I would love to be able to keep that door open, but I also don't want to hurt your feelings or make it awkward.
Question. And I actually have two answers to that question. The first one is, I tell my artists all the time, we never get so much face time with an agency as we do when we're bidding a job, right? Between the treatment and the creative call and the conversations with the art producer and all of it. This is your chance to shine. And even if you don't get the job, the fact that you've gotten so much attention, you wouldn't be getting otherwise. So that has to be a win. No matter what, even if you are not awarded the job, that has to be a win. To specifically give you a story about what you're asking, I represent an artist and a post-production company who last winter bid a job together. It was a really amazing, creatively cool, super exciting job that would have been like a killer end of year job. And we worked really hard on it, and everyone showed up and over the weekend, lots of time on it. Our producer was amazing. And we thought we were going to get it because we were the agency recommend. And for whatever reason, we didn't get the job. And it was a bummer. It was a huge bummer. But again, we were happy for the FaceTime and the engagement with the team and a chance to kind of get them to understand who we were and how we work. Well, just last week or 2 weeks ago, we got a call from them again, and they're like, okay, we have a new campaign and we want you to bid. And we were like, bring it on. We felt like we were, 10 steps ahead because of our experiences last time. And just yesterday, we were awarded the job. So if you are telling me that it's going to take 2 or 3 times for me to bid a job to get one with you, then yes, bring on the bids, and I will lose 2 or 3 jobs if I know I'm going to get that next one. So, I hope that, most of the industry out there doesn't take it personally and, recognizes it as an opportunity to shine for the future, because it is a learning process. And absolutely, I am completely, our team is completely open to hearing from you again. So I would think most people are as well, but I'm sure there are people who have their feelings hurt. So
great. And that is a great story. That makes me feel so good.
Okay. So before we end, I'm kind of curious as to what is your prediction for the rest of 2024? Do you think it'll be busy? Do you think AI will take over? Do you think it's going to slow down? or is it just so wacky out there? Who the heck knows?
I think we work in advertising. It's so wacky. Who the heck knows? I feel like I'm over predicting things because I'm always wrong. I feel like I'm going to be busy this year. Things are going to be happening. I've moved on to a new client primarily that is all about making stuff, whereas the past year my client was more about killing things. So I I'm very excited. I am optimistic for the rest of this year. So I hope that the rest of the industry moves in the same direction, moves towards making stuff. And I don't know if this is a prediction, but a hope that the industry will also be moving back towards experts creating content rather than influencers creating content. No. I would like to see more good work out there.
I am going to champion that as well. I like that. Okay, so before we leave, I always ask the same 2 questions. What is your favorite thing to do on a Sunday? And if you weren't a producer, what would you do?
So on a Sunday, assuming I don't have a rush project going on, what I like to do is, if it's rainy and gross, I like to go to the movies. I have this like AMC movie pass where you get to go to 3 movies a week, which I don't go to 3 movies a week, but I do like to go to a couple movies a month. But if it's a beautiful day or even a less than beautiful day, I like to do what I call a city hike, where I will just start in one part of the city and I'll end at the other part of the city, and I walk around all day. Usually there's food at one end and food at the other end and food in the middle of it, but I'm just moving around. I'm walking around. I'm, walking down streets I don't normally walk. I'm seeing new things, maybe going to a gallery. Yeah, city hikes.
A friend of mine years and years and years and years ago called that coincidancing. And I loved that. It's just, you go out there and you kind of bumper car around and you see where it takes you. And I'm relatively new to New York City, and my husband and I do that every weekend, and it's awesome. I love it.
Yes, I love it too.
Okay. If you
also in other cities.
Oh, and you know what? Good point. Yes, of course. In other cities, for sure. Mm-hmm. All right. If you weren't producing, what would you be doing?
Oh, right. What would I be doing?
With all that free time.
Yeah, with all that free time, I feel like, I don't know if travel agents still exist, but I feel like I'd be some sort of travel agent. I love, I guess, producing vacations, and usually my own. I'm a good planner. I have spreadsheets. I know what we're doing. I leave some room for some, change of plans, but I also make sure that we don't miss anything good. So probably a travel planner or a travel agent, if that is not that might still be a producer of sorts.
I love it. That's great. Well, Ilana, it was so amazing to get to know you and kind of hear about what it's like to be an integrated producer. I really appreciate you being on the show with us today and sharing such really good insights. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me as well. And it's great to hear things from your side of the fence.
Well, I don't know. I think having done this for so long and really appreciating the partners that we work with, it's so important to just keep talking. So thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.